Stronghold falls. Iraqi civilians start to welcome an overwhelming invasion force. Also, Eye on America. While they're risking their lives overseas, thieves back home may be stealing their good names. And a very special honor for two soldiers who gave all they had for their adopted country.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. U.S. forces now have Baghdad all but surrounded. They're at the city's airport and about to take control of it. And tonight, for the first time since the war began, Baghdad is in darkness. Its power mysteriously cut off. U.S. officials insist this is not the result of a U.S. attack. Throughout the day, the Army's 3rd Infantry Division pushed to the southern edge of Baghdad, while U.S. Marines led a second pincer along the Tigris River. CBS News correspondents are with American and Allied forces on the front lines to bring you clear, comprehensive coverage of the war. First, David Martin at the Pentagon with tonight's overview, the big picture. David?
Dan, they don't have it under complete control yet, but American tanks are on the tarmac at the Baghdad airport, and teams are out searching for any signs of contamination by chemical weapons.
Earlier in the day, those tanks barreled up the road towards Saddam Hussein International Airport as U.S. forces raced to encircle Baghdad. 50 miles away, Special Operations Forces raided a compound where Saddam had built himself a casino, hotels, and VIP villas. After a gunship shot up the high-rises, a helicopter landed in the middle of the compound, and commandos searched the buildings. It was in your face, but not nearly as valuable as an earlier raid against a dam which U.S. intelligence had feared the Iraqis would blow to flood the Euphrates River Valley. As American convoys rolled north, they tossed out Frisbees. After a day of fighting in which Apache helicopter gunships destroyed so many Iraqi armored vehicles, they finally had to call off the raids for lack of targets. Control of the international airport, and right next to it some of the most important presidential palaces and command centers, will give U.S. troops a handy base of operations for a strategy that seems designed to reduce the regime holed up in Baghdad to irrelevance.
Whatever remnants are left would not be in charge of anything except their own defense, and it would be fairly small compared to the rest of the country and what's happening.
For the first time, the lights went out all over Baghdad. The Pentagon insisted it had not targeted the power grid, so it must have been the regime getting ready for a street battle, which could be exactly what Saddam wants.
They have conducted exercises over recent months and have block captains. They have done a variety of things that suggest that they anticipate that they could end up in the city of Baghdad.
If Saddam and his cohorts are hoping to hold out long enough for a third party to broker a deal, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld told them to forget about it.
There's not a chance that there's going to be a deal. It doesn't matter who proposes it, there will not be one.
And one other avenue of escape is now closed. U.S. Special Operations Forces control movement along the road leading from Baghdad to Saddam's hometown of Tikrit. Dan?
David Martin reporting live from the Pentagon. Now we take you to the battlefield. CBS war reporter Jim Axelrod reports from the very tip of the spear. He is with the Army's 3rd Mechanized Infantry Division at Baghdad's main airport.
We are standing just outside Saddam International Airport, inside the airport proper. We can confirm the troops from the Army Infantry's 3rd Division have taken at least part of Saddam International Airport, a job they hope to finish tomorrow. This marks the end of a stunning push north from just south of Karbala here to the airport since Wednesday morning at 2 a.m. These are pictures from earlier today, just east of the Euphrates, as the 3rd Infantry pushed through some of the rural towns and villages. Wind come, wind come! Look how they were met. These are men, women, children smiling and waving. We heard people say, "Welcome, hello, Mr. Bush." These are pictures now 2 weeks into the war that, quite frankly, many had expected to see from the outset. A little different story closer to the airport at nightfall. This is what it sounded like as the Army ran into some opposition. On one of the main highways leading to the airport, the 3rd Infantry troops ran into some opposition. You can see the firefights but nothing that stalled them for more than a couple of hours, which has really been the case on this push north. More than one commander has asked the question, where is his army? Jim Axelrod, CBS News, Baghdad.
There's been pulverizing bombing tonight in and around Baghdad. One of the very few Western reporters still in the city is David Chater of our CBS News affiliate Britain's Sky TV. He filed this report by telephone.
We can see on the horizon the fight and the lights and the sound of explosions near the airport, which the American forces are now reported to have taken. It's a light and sound show all around us at the moment.
It's certainly a blow to the morale of the people here in Baghdad. You notice a real difference in the way they were feeling, the way they were looking, the way they were talking.
I think beyond the airport, that is the question. And why aren't the Iraqis resisting at the moment? I think they're trying to leave an open door, saying, okay, we've been waiting for you, come in and then see what you can get.
David Chater of Sky TV in Baghdad. So what kind of fighting, if any, will American forces face in the days ahead in the battle for Baghdad itself? CBS's Jim Stewart has been looking into this question.
Two scenarios for the final act in Baghdad are being suggested. The first is the largely successful British model used in Basra, Iraq's second largest city. There, troops have done some house-to-house searches, but the tactic has largely been to keep the city surrounded while allowing civilian traffic to come and go and hitting military targets inside as they pop up. The hope is that the city will implode following a popular uprising. The Allies have the same hope for Baghdad, but the timetable could be pushed. That scenario also calls for surrounding the city, but rather than turning it into a vast battleground, it could become a landscape of pinpoint targets. Saddam International Airport, the possible seat of an interim government, is already in Allied hands. That could be followed by the seizure of key electrical and water plants, and then surviving communications facilities.
That will all be shut down. They won't be able to communicate within certain parts of Baghdad. And you'll continue to ensure that happens. You know, we would control the water, the electricity, things like that.
Then, rather than fight it out street by street, the city could be chopped into manageable blocks with the seizure of key bridges across the Tigris River and large stadiums and parks where helicopters could insert troops. The goal would be not to lay siege, but to tighten the squeeze on what's left of the Iraqi leadership, with the hope that in the days or even hours ahead, the lights will go out on them as well. Jim Stewart, CBS News, Washington.
Reports have come into CBS News that some Iraqi soldiers inside Baghdad have pre-positioned U.S. military uniforms for use in defense of the city. A possible confusion factor, but these reports have not been solidly confirmed. One of the U.S. military's most important successes this day came about 90 miles south of Baghdad in the city of Najaf, a holy site for Iraq's majority Shiite Muslims. As CBS's Mark Strassman reports, the Americans won there by avoiding a fight.
Saddam's statue in Najaf Saddam Square is gone, like the stranglehold that the Fedayeen, Saddam's paramilitaries, clamped on this town for years. In the heart of Najaf, crowds celebrated outside the Tomb of Ali Mosque, a revered sanctuary for Shia Muslims, Iraq's majority. And here came a reminder that throughout Iraq, U.S. troops face a minefield of distrust as the crowd's mood grew angry. U.S. troops were arranging a meeting with the mosque's cleric, who had issued a decree urging Muslims to remain calm and not hinder U.S. forces. He asked them for protection, and they moved toward his home. But the crowd mistook that as U.S. troops about to storm the mosque or target the cleric.
In city, okay. In city, okay. Imam Ali, no.
Commander Chris Hughes now faced a volatile standoff.
Everybody smile! Don't point your weapons at them!
What this crowd resented most was the idea of soldiers with guns going into the mosque, going into their holy place. That's what the Fedayeen had done all these years. To defuse a crisis, Hughes ordered his troops out.
Everyone back up. Turn back up slowly, continue to smile. These people don't understand that he asked us to come in. We'll let them sort it out.
Coming out now are Najaf's anti-Saddam insurgents, coaxed by U.S. commanders.
We're here to support your efforts and to provide any protection and assistance that you need. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
This holy city feels liberated and likes that feeling.
They want U.S. forces to stay.
Yes, they want They want them to stay to protect them. But after that, they want the government to be national and to be democracy.
This is a moment most of them wanted for years, the chance to start again. Mark Strassman, CBS News, Najaf, Iraq.
Based on a preliminary examination, U.S. officials believe 9 of 11 bodies found this week at an Iraqi hospital are those of American soldiers. The remains are being flown to Dover Air Force Base in Delaware for identification. So far in the war, officially, 57 U.S. troops and 27 British have been killed. In addition, 7 Americans are prisoners of war and 15 are missing in action. Iraqi casualties, military and civilian, not known. Speaking to Marines today at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, President Bush saluted the Americans who gave their lives.
Will be forgotten by this grateful nation. We honor their service to America, and we pray their families will receive God's comfort and God's grace.
President Bush at Camp Lejeune. Looking to the future, the president and his aides have drawn up an expensive and fairly detailed plan for rebuilding Iraq. Now there's debate about who should and should not have a say in it. CBS's Bill Plant reports there are strong feelings on both sides of the Atlantic.
With the coalition victory closer, European governments are now looking at the shape of post-war Iraq and toning down their opposition to the war. Today, German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder, one of the war's most vocal critics, dropped his earlier opposition to removing Saddam Hussein. Schröder, speaking to the German parliament, called for the United Nations, not the U.S. and Britain, to be in charge of post-war Iraq, a demand echoed by the French foreign minister today in Brussels.
I think we should be very pragmatic facing the situation, the current situation in Iraq. We believe that the UN should have a central role in the reconstruction of Iraq, whether political, whether economical.
Not so fast, said Secretary of State Powell. He told the NATO meeting the U.S. does see a role for the UN in Iraq, but made it very clear that there's no way the U.S. and Britain will allow the United Nations to be in charge after it refused to back the military action in Iraq.
It was the coalition that came together and took on this difficult mission at political expense, at the expense of the treasure, the money that it costs, but at the expense of lives as well.
The reconstruction of Iraq will also be expensive, and today the administration served notice that it expects some financial help after the war is over. The Treasury Secretary said that he'll be asking the other nations in the G7, which includes France and Germany, to contribute to the rebuilding of Iraq. Dan?
Live from the White House, Bill Plant reporting. Thanks. Coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, they gave their all for America. Now America is giving them in death what they wanted most in life. The U.S. fighting force now at war in Iraq is not the U.S. military of World War II, Korea, or Vietnam. For one thing, there is no draft. And tens of thousands now fighting, in some cases dying, in Iraq are not even American citizens. But as CBS's Sandra Hughes reports, some very much want to be.
It's an oath that for some could mean laying down their lives for a country they can't yet call their own. Christian Leon is an immigrant from Ecuador.
If I serve, I to serve to the Army of the United States, I serve to the democracy of the world.
They're green card soldiers, legal residents but not yet citizens, and their numbers are at an all-time high. More than 37,000 serving in the armed forces today, compared with 28,000 in 2000. Several have already given their lives in Operation Iraqi Freedom. Marine Lance Corporal Jose Gutierrez, a Guatemalan, died at Qasr.
He loved this country because this country gave him all the opportunities that he could not find in his own country.
Corporal Jose Angel Garibay was born in Mexico, joined the Marines out of high school, and was killed just south of Baghdad. Yesterday, the Bureau of Citizenship and Immigration Services made both soldiers U.S. citizens posthumously.
Very happy to that happening, especially for my sister. There's no way to replace him, but at least they can be complete the wishes he had.
Last summer, President Bush signed an executive order allowing green card holders to become naturalized as U.S. citizens without the usual 3-year waiting period. Many are naturalized while still in the service. In some areas of Los Angeles, up to 50% of recruits are not yet citizens.
They come here and they just feel like they owe the country something, and the only way the only thing that they see that they can give back to America is service.
And sometimes they give their lives before the dream of citizenship is ever realized. Sandra Hughes, CBS News, Costa Mesa, California.
The weather is becoming a factor again in the war. This time it's not ferocious sandstorms, although the sandstorm season is still underway. This time it's mostly extreme desert heat. Temperatures are expected to top 100 degrees this weekend, especially in southern Iraq. The good news, daytime highs will be back to the 80s by the middle of next week. Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, Eye on America investigates men and women in uniform while they're far from home. Someone could be ripping them off. On the CBS Market Watch, America's struggling airlines are in for another taxpayer bailout. Under heavy lobbying, Congress is including about $3 billion for the airlines in the supplemental appropriations bill to fund the war. Stocks closed lower today. The Dow lost 44 points. The NASDAQ was off a fraction. While Americans in uniform are overseas, many of them are in the line of fire because they can become easy targets here at home, targets of criminals out to steal their identities. It happened to the man you're about to meet in tonight's Eye on America, reported by CBS's Jerry Bowen.
When Navy Commander Frank Malott returned home a hero from the last Gulf War, he never thought he'd be headed back.
Carrier Airborne Early Morning Squadron 116.
Now he's on standby, and he's worried. Not about war, but about the nightmare he'll leave behind.
It's very frustrating. It's administratively frustrating. It's emotionally frustrating.
Malott and his wife Sherry are victims of identity theft, and with Frank's possible deployment, she's nervous.
I'm terrified. He's the only one who can fix the identity theft that has occurred to him. No one's going to talk to me.
Their nightmare began in 2001 when Frank's estranged half-brother stole his Social Security number.
He owed child support, back penalties.
And they're still cleaning up the mess.
And that's another bill collector.
That's another bill collector.
Military personnel like the Malotts are especially vulnerable because Frank's Social Security number is their only identification. It tracks his career, his promotions. It's the number Sherry uses on health care forms and for cashing checks on base. And in the hands of an identity thief, say experts, it's a time bomb.
One of the big problems of identity theft is you don't know when the imposters are going to use the information or how.
Linda Foley runs the Identity Theft Resource Center.
Close those accounts, get new numbers.
She says military personnel have an even harder time fixing the problem.
How do you clear your records from a foxhole? I don't have a good answer for that.
Worse still, unless a person can prove they're a victim of ID theft, the credit bureaus charge fees to consumers who want to monitor their own accounts, a charge anywhere from $12 to $200 a year. Frank Malott says there's got to be a better way.
Who's left holding the bag? It's me.
Not just for him, but for all ID theft victims, especially those in the military and the families they're leaving behind. In Dahlgren, Virginia, I'm Jerry Bowen for Eye on America.
There has been no let-up in the long-running Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Early today, Israeli troops raided a refugee camp in the Gaza Strip. 4 Palestinians were killed, 3 in a missile strike by an Israeli attack helicopter. The Israelis also demolished 4 buildings said to contain weapons for Palestinian militants. Straight ahead here on the CBS Evening News, saved in a daring rescue. We'll tell you how Private First Class Jessica Lynch is doing after surgery today. We end tonight with an update on U.S. Army Private First Class Jessica Lynch. 2 days after U.S. Special Operations Forces rescued her from an Iraqi hospital, she had surgery today in Germany to repair a fractured disc in her back. Her family in West Virginia said doctors found no evidence that Lynch was shot or stabbed during the 9 days she was in Iraqi hands. She faces more surgery tomorrow on her legs and arm.
We know she's in good spirits because they told her they was going to put pink cast on her legs and arms.
Lynch is 19 years old. Everyone describes her in virtually the same terms, a fighter. In fact, here's what she said at Fort Bliss, Texas, before going to Iraq.
I love my job, so I love being here, and I like my unit.
Jessica Lynch says she wants to be a kindergarten teacher someday. You just know she will. And that's part of our world tonight. Dan Rather reporting for the CBS Evening News. Thank you for joining us tonight. We hope to see you right back here tomorrow. Good night.
For news 24 hours a day, log on to cbsnews.com. The assault on Baghdad. Tomorrow, experience CBS News.